Welcome to the Biz Doctor podcast, my love letter to business owners the world over. I'm your host, Goldstein, award-winning business consultant and advisor fondly nicknamed the Biz Doctor by my clients. I help business owners who are burning the candle at both ends diagnose what is actually keeping them buried in the day-to-day busy work, and then formulate a treatment plan to adjust their business and team to fit them, so they can take a breath and a vacation and have more fun making a bigger impact than ever. So grab your favorite beverage and your earbuds, and let's dive into our latest episode. When it comes to an employer-employee relationship, I believe there's really only one thing that can't be overcome, and that's resentment. I will go to my grave saying resentment is the one that once it creeps in and that employee has it, they've got to go. This is an emotion that once infected is almost impossible to eradicate. In fact, in my opinion, it's the kiss of death, and here's why. Welcome back to the Biz Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Goldstein, and today I want to talk about this feeling and emotion that has been on the lips of a lot of people lately, and that is resentment. It seems like it's something I'm hearing more and more from employers and employees, so I want to take some time today and really dive into what it is, where it comes from, and what to do about it if it's infecting someone on your team. It's defined by psychologists as a tertiary emotion because it's thought to contain 3 second-level emotions. The first is contempt, which is made up of anger and disgust. The second is shock, which is surprise and disgust. And the third is outrage, surprise, and anger. What causes it differs, but my theory is that the main cause is my favorite quote, which if you've been listening, you've heard me say it over and over again. Unshared expectations are nothing more than premeditated resentments. Resentment gains momentum and traction with feelings of frustration around not being heard, not having your expectations met, as I shared a moment ago, or not feeling valued for the work you do. I'm sure we have experienced resentment at one point in our lives. I know I have. And looking back, I also know that I was responsible. If I had had better boundaries or spoken up before I got to the point, I would have never gotten to that breaking point. But sadly, not everybody is as introspective or self-aware as I am. And not everybody has taken an emotional intelligence course like I have as well. So I'm sure you're asking yourself if you can stop the runaway train before it gets to the resentment stop. The answer is yes, sort of. But as I shared, once that train reaches the resentment station, there's really nothing you can do but bid that person adieu or take a major step back. So the simple and most effective answer I can give you about how to stop it before you get there is talk about it. Now, I know you might be rolling your eyes, but bear with me. It's not as simple as letting the words fly out of your mouth, or rather their mouth. It's about letting them be heard. Because if we go back to the quote that I shared just a few minutes ago about unshared expectations are nothing more than premeditated resentments, I see resentment in team come down to really, truly, either they feel like what they're saying is not being heard or they're not speaking up. And if somebody's not speaking up, there's not much you can do. But if you've given them the opportunity to, chances are that might be all it takes. I know it might be hard to shut your trap and let someone get it all out, but trust me, it's better out than in. Because if they stuff it down, it's going to be like Mount Vesuvius when it comes out. We've seen it. I've seen it. You know, that quiet person in the office that you're kind of like, I know something's bothering them, but they won't talk about it. And then all of a sudden they erupt in the middle of a meeting or quit abruptly or something like that. And you're like, I never saw it coming. Chances are you did see it coming. You just didn't recognize the signs. So if you have an inkling that someone on your team is getting to this point, or if you're almost there, here's how to have this conversation the right way. First, make sure that they know that this is a safe space. I know that sounds cliche, but I mean safe in terms of their job is not in jeopardy. This is not going to be held against them or used as a weapon or leverage, but really this is a conversation from the heart to understand what's going on, and that you're doing this because you care and you want everybody to win. So this is the ultimate win-win. The first step to this is share what happened based on an action and the resulting feeling. So what this sounds like is when this happened, I felt why. And I'll tell you a story to illustrate this in a little bit. The second is ownership. And again, not everybody has taken an emotional intelligence course. This is where I learned this technique. You're going to have to probably do some teaching of how to make this work. But the second is ownership. And the reason I say you're probably going to have to do some teaching, or rather leadership, is I know when I was growing up, I was not taught to take ownership over the story that I created based on something that happened. And so this step of ownership is simply saying, the story I created was XYZ. And then the third is action. My request of you moving forward is why. So for example, I'm going to make this up off the top of my head. What this might look like is when I was passed over for a promotion, I felt really discouraged and like you didn't value me and that I wasn't important to the company anymore. So the story I created was that I'm not valued, you don't see me, that my time here has come to an end or should probably come to an end, or my job needs to change, something along those lines. My request of you moving forward is if I'm in the running for a promotion and ultimately chosen, that we sit down and we have a conversation about where my gaps are and how much you value me and how we can work together to close those gaps. So it's a very simple process, but what I love about this is it really takes the personal out of it. I mean, yes, it's a personal story and you share your feelings and the story that you created, but it takes out the sometimes really energetically charged communication that doesn't always result in an effective conversation. And I'm going to give you actually a real life example of this. So one of my fractional COO clients moved offices recently, which meant that they were now getting more single offices, but there weren't enough single offices for everyone. And we both knew that there are some strategic hires that we are in the process of hiring. And one, if not both of those empty offices would soon be taken. And so I told the CEO, I said, leave the offices open. Don't let anybody set up shop there because it's going to cause resentment in the team when we have to quote unquote kick them out. Well, he didn't listen to me. And there was drama with one of the employees when we had to move her out. And by the way, this is probably one of the most challenging parts of the work I do when I come in as fractional COO is letting my clients make mistakes I see from a mile away that I told them to avoid, but I digress. In this case, even though he's like, well, I told her that, she might have to move offices and whatnot when I let her have the office. And I said, yeah, that's probably not good enough. And in this case, I was right. And it took this employee a solid month of the CEO checking in, knowing something was off, being like, what's going on? She's like, nothing, it's fine, it's home, whatever, before she finally confessed that she was resentful. And in that month, her performance decreased. She stopped showing up on time, called in sick more often. There were a few big mistakes that actually happened in the team. And it was all because she was resentful over, you guessed it, mismatched expectations. In her mind, she'd been there longer than, well, I think she's even with a few people in the office, but she felt since she was a manager of a department that she deserved to have the office. And we had a different conversation about that because one of the directors was going in the office. But my point is, in sharing this story, when you give your team the open door to have a conversation and share what's going on without the fear of being punished or it impacting their job, it's going to change a lot of things. And by the way, I know I'm talking about teams today, but what I'm sharing can really apply to personal lives. So stick close. So the reason that I'm so adamant about not keeping a resentful employee around boils down to these 3 key points. And again, before I dive into these 3 points, if you get to them before resentment really settles in, absolutely keep them around. But it's when the resentment has really settled in that you can't come back from. The first of these key points is, outside of pink eye, this is the most contagious disease in the workplace. This toxicity is sneaky, it's consuming, and toxic. I know I said toxic twice, but I want to say that because it's doubly true. When someone feels slighted or like they haven't been heard or valued or whatever has caused the resentment, they want to know that they're right in feeling wronged, which means they're more than likely going to start gossiping, creating allies against the person who wronged them, generally causing dis-ease and distrust in the team. Their behavior will unsettle the team, and ultimately it's going to impact the business in ways that will be hard to recover. Some of those ways are, it might impact culture, trust, revenue, leadership. It's something that I want you to pay particular attention to and make sure that, if something is telling you that something's up with someone, nip it in the bud. Go find out why. Second, rarely, if ever, as I've mentioned before, can you become unresentful once they've passed that chasm. If you have an emotional intelligence training, like I said, maybe your team does too, you have a better chance of walking it back, but that's maybe 1% of people. So there's a steep climb here to unring that bell. And even if you use the clearing conversation that I shared a moment ago, the residue of resentment could still be lingering if they feel like they still haven't gotten what they want or like there is forward movement to what they want. So pay attention. I said this before, but I want to say it again. People really aren't that complicated. We want to know we're valued, that we're connected, that we're heard, that we're contributing. If there's a disconnect in your team, if you're getting the spidey senses that something's going on with your team, do the human thing and just have the conversation. And I know we're all busy, we're so much better and programmed at looking at the gaps and whatnot, but really take some time to figure out what makes your team tick and what their flow looks like, because the better you know your team, the more you'll be able to say, ooh, something's off. Let's go find out what it is. Before we dive into the next bit, I want to take a second to share with you something that I've seen drastically change businesses and teams for the better. Imagine waking up every morning with a team that knows exactly what is expected of them and how to achieve success without you having to micromanage them. Imagine how much time and dollars you will save by hiring the right team member from the start. Not to mention getting the most out of every current member of your team. That is what's possible with our tried and tested tool, the Golden Key Scorecard. The scorecard is a simple, impactful, and fillable tool for managing your team, ditching inefficiency, and I guarantee will help you stop playing whack-a-mole chasing team docs all over the place. It's as easy as filling out a form. If you want to get out from under your business, shifting from business operator to business owner, and take your business to the next level while reclaiming your time, then our Golden Key Scorecard is just the ticket. Our scorecard provides the time-tested framework and process to get you and your team out of the weeds and into a well-oiled machine that can scale without you. It's time for you to run your business instead of the other way around. Become an expert in this critical piece of the foundation to creating a high-performing team. Download the Golden Key Scorecard for free at goldenkeypartnership.com/go. Now back to the show. And then last but not least, resentment can be the gateway to self and subconscious sabotage, as I illustrated moments ago. Subconscious or conscious thoughts of this will show them will start being illuminated in their behavior if you don't address this and you let it continue. Such things like showing up late, calling in sick more, dropping the ball in projects, gossiping, back-talking, disengagement, you name it. Chances are, if you're experiencing these in your team, the root is resentment. So do you see why this emotion can be the silent killer of teams? My best advice is to check the pulse on your team as often as you can with a simple set of questions and just listening. These are the simple questions I'm going to share. And also, as a slight sidebar, it's really important to find some time with your team to talk to them and not make it about work. So what I, advise a lot of my clients to do is either monthly or quarterly, depends on how big your team is, meeting where it's 45 minutes to an hour. There's no agenda. There's no nothing. They lead it. The one rule is you can talk about anything, but you can't talk about work. And the only reason you would talk about work is because you're sharing about how your job is forwarding your vision. But there's no talking about projects or colleagues or anything like that. It's purely a time to sit down and understand what's going on in their life. How are they going towards their triathlon goals? How's the new baby? How's their marriage? And I know this might raise some of your HR hackles, but I'm not saying to cross boundaries. I'm certainly not saying that. And I know that we're all a little gun shy about that given the past, decade and how business relationships have changed. But just because there are worries about like, ooh, is this getting too personal? You'll know. But just because there's that fear, don't miss out on getting to know a really great human being, because the better you know them, the easier it's going to be to support them, to integrate in their team, to promote them, all the things. Now, my soapbox aside, here are the simple set of questions that you can help keep a pulse on your team. What's working? What's not? Where do you need support? So I actually use this every week with my team when we check in. It's really simple because I think a lot of times as leaders, we like to tell people what's working, what's not, where they need support, but that doesn't actually support them. I mean, sometimes, there's the difference between feedback and illuminating a gap and talking about, doing a postmortem where something didn't work. That's different. But I always have them tell me first what's working, what's not, and where you do need support before I come in with feedback or gaps or, if there was a mistake that was made and we do a postmortem, because I really genuinely want to see if what they're seeing is what I'm seeing. And so when you ask them what's working, what's not, and where do you need support, it gives you the ability to really understand the pulse of the business from their side. So this set of questions is paramount, though, also in helping your team feel heard. And as your business grows and you've less face time with your teams because your leaders are managing them, it's important to be proactive in dropping into the ranks to check this pulse. Now, I know that sometimes this can go a little sideways. So I'm going to tell you how to do this and not disrupt your team. My friend Cameron Harold calls sometimes when leaders do this wrong, seagull leadership, where you swoop in, shit all over everything, and then leave. That's not what I'm telling you to do here. What I'm telling you to do is drop in and be curious and listening. When you're asking them what's working, what's not, where do you need support, and you're being curious about their answers, and they're telling you, just because they said they had an issue or something isn't working, it doesn't mean that you are the one to solve it or that it needs solving now. That's the difference between coming in and doing a pulse check that's not disruptive versus coming in and doing a pulse check that throws the business into chaos. Because I think if you've been listening to the show long enough, you know that I'm a big proponent of staying in your lane, staying in your unique abilities. And if you are not responsible for those 5 acres and they're telling you about something in those 5 acres, and then you decide to solve it without talking to the person that actually is in ownership of that, then it can create chaos, confusion over leadership, and a whole host of other issues. So pop in, get a pulse check. And if you have something that they bring up, bring it to the leader and say, hey, Marie brought this to my attention. I'd love to know what you think. Because again, when you build your team and it's a high performing team, hopefully you've done it well enough that you trust them, that you know they're the expert and that they can handle it. And when you're the eyes and ears to help them handle it better, everybody wins. But don't try and handle it yourself and create chaos in your team. No one will thank you for that. Just assure them that you hear them and that you will address it with the people that need to be involved and looped into it. That's really all I've got for resentment. I'll leave you with this last cautionary tale or thought. I don't want you to take this episode and suddenly think that, resentment is lurking around every corner. It's not. I know it's one of those things that I made seem very serious, and it is. Though I would say that if you are a leader who cares about your team, who does the pulse checks, who's proactive, who listens, who's curious, the chances of resentment being present in your team are pretty low. And so I did this episode really just to loop you into what could happen if you're not paying attention. Don't, all of a sudden go look at your team and like, who's resentful? You'll know. But don't think that everybody on your team is resentful because you made a decision or whatnot, or let this inhibit you from making decisions that are right for the business, even if it impacts people. Just be a proactive communicator with change management. A lot of resentment can be resolved with simple communication or proactive communication. Ask yourself whenever you're having one of those moments where you're like, ooh, could somebody be resentful of this decision, of how can I best mitigate this risk by proactively addressing it? That's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening in. If anything I shared sparked something in you, we'd love for you to share this episode with your friends. I'd also love to hear from you. So let's connect. Tag or DM me on Instagram at It's Lauren Goldstein, or LinkedIn, or wherever you hang out on the interwebs. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you are the first to get notified when our next episode is live and ready for your ears. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Biz Doctor podcast. Now, I like to say that friends don't let friends WebMD your business. So if you're wondering what your next steps could be, here are some options for you. No matter what, head to the show notes or to my website, goldenkeypartnership.com, for some impactful resources to support you getting out from under your business. That's also where you'll find the links to learn more about our services and how we support business owners, just like you, who are ready to make the successful jump from business operator in the trenches to visionary business owner with more freedom and flexibility. All of that info is on our website, so pop on over to learn more or get in touch. goldenkeypartnership.com. Finally, if you love the Biz Doctor podcast, I'd be so grateful if you would share it with your friends and network and give us a 5-star rating or review wherever you listen to your podcast.
This is Story Studio Network.